Hi everybody, welcome back. This is Stefan Baumann, and this is the second video in the Lightroom 3 tutorial series. In the last episode, we discussed the library module in Lightroom 3. So if you click on it, this is what we looked like before. We talked about doing collections, things like that. So now we're going to go to Develop. Click on the Develop tab. Now the first thing you want to pay attention to is the histogram, which is basically this graph on the upper hand side in the upper right hand side of the screen. Now basically what this depicts is the tonal range and color range from light to dark. On the left hand side of the graph represents all of the dark tones and colors. Right hand side represents the light. Now the thing with the histogram is an ideal graph would start at the very bottom left corner, go up, up and down, and then end at the bottom right corner of the graph. Now, when you have the graph go and actually touching the edges like it is now in the darks, that means you're actually losing information. To see if you're losing information, aside from just the graph itself, you can click the little triangle up on the top, and these blue dots will show up where the shadow is. If you click it in the right, it'll show where the highlights are clipping. Clipping just refers to the fact that you're clipping the histogram off before it reaches its optimal length, which means you're losing detail. And if you're printing especially, this is bad because, in this picture it's not such a big deal because it's such a small amount, but if I were to have a darker picture, you'd have a lot more of this clipping where you can't see the detail. And if you turn it up, all the red areas are where you're losing information because it's too bright. So let's go back to 0. Actually, click in the box here. 0, enter. There we go. So to get rid of the blue marks, just click the dot one more time. Now, a good example of showing how it gets light or dark is I'll move the exposure slider. Now, just watch the histogram itself. If you go to the right, it moves to the right and it starts clipping on the right, which means it's getting brighter. You go to the left, it means it's getting darker and clipping on the left. And like I said, what you want is like a nice even kind of graph. A little bit of clipping is not going to be a big deal, but you want to try and minimize it. One way to get rid of that is using the tools in the basic drop-down menu in Develop. But we'll get to that next. To start with, I'm going to show you these 5 tools right here below the histogram. Also, your camera information from the shot that you've taken will be displayed right below the histogram. So it'll have your shutter speed, your aperture, which focal length lens you're using, as well as your ISO. This first tool right here is the crop tool. If you click on this, this allows you to crop and change the shape of your photo. So right now it's on lock. That's one option that you can change. That basically means that when you change the crop, the proportions remain the same. If you unclick it, it unlocks it, and then you can change the crop proportions however you want. Make it look nice and pretty, whatever pleases you. The only caution I will have for that is that when you're doing printing, you're not always going to have the paper size that fits your crop. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're doing a large group of portraits, you want to stay pretty standard, like with an 8x10 or a 4x6, 5x7. If you're doing large volume. If you're doing custom prints, then it doesn't matter. Go for it, have at it. Or if you're just doing stuff for online, same thing. Just for now, we'll lock it back down. There's a little drop-down menu next to the lock pad that says Original, which is basically the crop that comes out of your camera. In my case, I have a full-frame sensor, which means that the crop from my camera is essentially the same as a 35mm piece of film. Same ratio. But if you click Original, there's an automatic preset menu. 1:1 basically just means a square, which is what you would get actually out of a medium format camera. If you click on it again, there's 8x10. There's 8.5 by 11, which is like a normal sheet of paper. 5x7s. Each one of these has their pros and cons. The cool thing is you can also enter custom. Let's say I wanted to have a really narrow looking print, so 10 inches tall by 5 inches wide. Hit OK, and that makes a nice, thin crop like that. Now, unlike Photoshop, you're not going to be moving the crop box that you make. You're going to move the photo. So if you click down on the photo, you actually drag the photo and the crop box stays where it is. That allows you to be a little more accurate, because in Photoshop you can actually crop outside of the photo's area, so you'll get like these white corners or borders if you're not careful. Here prevents you from doing that. If you want to rotate the crop, bring your mouse cursor outside of the print, and you'll see these two little arrows with a curve in between, like an elbow. Click and drag in either direction, and it'll actually help you to rotate. The other way you can do it is actually using the angle slider here. It does the same thing. Now, there's also this tool right here, the angle. If you click on that, you can actually make these white lines line up with whatever line you set. So let's say I wanted to click here, drag, and you'll see this line show up. That's basically the angle that the grid on your crop box are going to align to. So automatically goes to that. Do it again if I wanted it to line up, let's say, with the wood here. Brings it back over. If you want to cancel the crop, you can right click, reset crop, goes back to normal. To set a crop that you like or to choose it, you just double click on the image and it becomes whatever you choose. So for him, just to make it a little bit more pleasing, get rid of that yellow thing up top and double click, and we're done with the crop. Now you have a clone and heal tool. Basically, it's like in Photoshop, you can clone and heal an area that you want to fix. So if you first get out of the tool, zoom in. Let's say I wanted to fix one of these little moles or whatever. You click on the circle here. Healing basically blends from the area surrounding where you sample, and cloning actually copies a separate area to cover over that. Opacity just changes how see-through it is. Size, you can either do this with a slider, or you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse, or you can use the bracket keys on your keyboard to change the size of the item. So I'm going to choose this spot right here. Right now we're on heal. It's going to resample to an area that it thinks looks very similar. Problem is, it's not always very accurate, in the sense that he has a wrinkle coming here, so it's going to show up in the sample area. You can click on the sample and move it around so that it looks like the area that you actually want to sample. Let go. Opacity, if you slide it down, you see right through it. Slide it up if you don't. And it's the same with clone. Clone is like a more direct copy. So like you'll see a clearer circle around the spot that you're trying to fix, whereas heal tries to kind of blend it out with the surrounding area so that it looks smoother. To get rid of an action, you can either do Control Z or Command Z on a Mac, or you hit the backspace button and it'll actually get rid of it. It has a cute little sound effect and a little cloud. Click the circle again to complete your work there. Red eye. This guy doesn't have red eye, but how it works is you get this tool, you change the size the same way. Click the red dot in the center of where you want the person's eye to be, and once you do that, okay, well, unable to find red eye. As with any other tool, if you hold down the space bar and click, this little hand will show up, and that lets you move the picture around, because you can't do that while you're in the tool if you don't hold down the space bar. So now you have this guy's eye. You can, I guess I already clicked on his eye before, but you can change the size of the pupil that you want it to be. It's not hugely apparent, but you can darken it, lighten it, whichever you prefer. Same as the other one, hit it again, it goes away. Click in the set in picture, zoom out. Next tool is pretty cool, especially when you're doing landscapes or something where it's really bright on one part of the image and not on the other. It's the gradient. Now you can choose from, once you click the gradient, you have this drop down menu here, exposure, brightness, contrast, all these different things that you can do. In this case, let's just do exposure. To make it easier to see, I'll lower the exposure. You click on one part of the image, drag it, and it actually causes a gradient. Now to move it, you keep holding down and you can just rotate your mouse, choose which direction you want to come from, and then if you want to actually let go of the mouse, if you click on the dot here in the center, you can actually move the whole gradient around. Now to get rid of it, you can either backspace, poof, it's gone. Works the same with if you're doing color, if you wanted to be fancy, which in this one doesn't really work, but adds a nice little color gradient, makes him look like he's sick. Backspace again, click the tool to complete, and the final one up here is the brush tool. Brush, same thing, you have a drop down menu, you can choose from exposure, brightness, contrast, all of these things. Skin soften is one that you're going to probably use a lot if you're doing portraiture. Basically what that does is the brush area, it lowers down the clarity so that it blends it together. Helps especially with women, you want to smooth out their skin. But we'll just stick with this guy for now. Density is basically the same as opacity. Flow of the brush is basically if you take a wet paintbrush with paint on it and smear it, it's gonna make the streak go nice and far. If it's mostly a dry paintbrush with just a little bit of paint and you smear it, the streak isn't going to go as far. That's basically the concept. Feather is how far out you want the actual brush stroke to blend out, and that's measured by the circle around the. There's two circles in the brush, and the outer circle is the feather area. So you can change that, and you'll see the circle getting bigger or smaller. I usually like it pretty big. Size, you can either use a bracket, scroll wheel, or you can use a slide bar like right here. So for his face, I'm going to hold down spacebar, click on his face. Now, like a normal person, his skin's not perfect, especially because he's older. I'm going to pop the density up, and then you basically just start brushing by holding down and clicking. And what it does is it kind of smooths out the tones. It helps even out the pores a little bit. You can overdo it and make somebody look like they have Barbie skin. If somebody has really bad skin, same with the clone tool. You're going to have to go into Photoshop to fix it. I mean, this guy's not bad, so you really don't have to worry about it. But some people have reptile skin. They don't want that in their picture. But just move it around. You want to try and avoid the eyes and the lips because you want detail in those areas. Those are what capture the viewer's eye. Backspace again will get rid of it, or you just click the tool again and you set your option and then it will stay. So that's part one of the develop module. There's quite a lot that you can do in develop, so I'm going to break this up into several episodes. So thanks again everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time, and I hope I was able to give you some good information. Thanks.